Well, hello friends. Welcome to the SerenityOS update for October 2022. It's been another lovely month in the project, clocking in at around 1,200 commits across our various repositories. But my favorite thing that happened in October was actually the return of the community showcase. After a 6-month break, we finally made a new one, and we had 10 members of the community giving lightning demos of what they were working on, and it's available on this YouTube channel as a video, so there's a link to it in the description. I really recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it. But now let's look at new stuff in October. Okay, here we are on the October edition of the SerenityOS desktop, and the first thing I want to show you today is called Escalator. Escalator is a new system utility that allows you to launch GUI programs that require authentication first. So if I want to launch something as admin, I will run it through Escalator, and it's kind of like a graphical sudo type thing, or run as root, as the title here says. So if I provide my password, then it will launch text editor as root. And this was built by Ashley, and it's something that's been missing from the system for a very long time. So thank you very much, Ashley, for starting work on all of this stuff. And an example of where we use it more organically in the system is when you open up the network settings. Previously, we would just complain that you're not root, but now instead of doing that, we actually ask you to authenticate before we show you the network settings, and then they are already running as root. So this is very, very cool. So that's Escalator. And the next thing I want to show you is kind of related to authentication a little bit. It's the way that our login system works. We had this problem previously that if you were to switch to a different user, for example, to the admin, you couldn't access the session-specific services like the launch server and so on, because they belong to a non-user who's the owner of the session. But now, thanks to some changes by Peter, it's actually possible to just launch text editor like this, and it just works. Previously, it didn't work because it couldn't find the right path to all the session-specific system services. But now all of that just works. So very good. Thank you, Peter, for fixing that. It was a bit of a nuisance for a while that all that stuff didn't work. Okay. And something completely unrelated, but that makes a lot of sense to me, is that we used to have a utility called JP, which was sort of a JSON pretty printing utility, but it has now been renamed to JSON, and it gained some interesting functionality. So Max has been working on the JSON utility and adding some basic query support. So what you can do with it is that if I were to, for example, get the system process list from the kernel here, which we can see has this entry called processes, which is an array, then I can actually query that processes .0. No, that's not how you do that. Oh, -q. Then it will give me only that object, and I can drill down further. Maybe I just want the name of the process 0 here. Then I would say name, and it tells me that that is the kernel process. This is a very, very cool thing, and I'm super happy that Max has been adding this stuff, because there have been many times when I've been grepping through these type of results, and being able to query them in a more structured way is a very, very nice addition. So big thanks to Max for improving this. Another thing that Max also did was add a pkill utility. So we already had kill all, which allows you to kill all the processes with a name, but we now also have pkill, which allows you to kill processes with a regex. So for example, if I were to want to kill all the terminal processes, like the one I'm running, but I just want to say the middle of the word, ermi, then I can now do that with pkill. Fantastic. But yeah, it's a nice thing to have. I definitely have muscle memory for pkill. I'm sure many people do. So from all of us to Max, big thanks. And before I forget, something totally random, but something that's been silly for a long time is it used to be that you could open up these combo box dropdowns, and you could drag the dropdown away from the thing it's attached to. And we had that bug for like years, but now Gunnar has actually fixed it. So I can no longer drag this thing away. I'm trying to drag it away. And it's weird to show something that sort of used to break and doesn't break anymore, but it's one of those like things that had been around forever. And now it's just fixed, and it's almost weird because sometimes you almost grow attached to bugs because they're so silly. And that was kind of one of those. But I'm very happy to see it fixed. So thank you, Gunnar, for that. Let's see, some other... Well, here's a very controversial change. This month, Jeje went and updated the snake game so that the snake eats actual snake food, like a fish here, or a bunny, I guess, a mouse, and so on. I don't even know what that is. But previously, the snake would only eat vegetables, because that's the way I originally made the game. Being a vegetarian, I didn't really think about what the snake was eating. But as Jeje pointed out, snakes don't really eat vegetables. So now the game has been updated, and the snake eats all of these different appropriate foodstuffs. So thank you, Jeje, for fixing the scientific accuracy of our snake game. Okay, so by the way, since I'm talking about games, let me show you a cool game that was ported this month by CFlip. So this is something called ClassiCube, which is, I guess, kind of a Minecraft-like game. And it kind of works, although the mouse support is a little busted. I think it's trying to use relative mouse events, which we don't support in our SDL port, but it's probably something that we could teach it how to do. But it's already rendering at a reasonable 20-ish FPS. So this is very, very cool. Thank you, CFlip, for working on this. And to everybody who made it possible with all the libraries underneath, of course. But yeah, I know that it's been almost like a meme question for the last couple of years. People asking like, oh, when can I play Minecraft on SerenityOS? And this is definitely the closest we've ever been to being able to do that. So big ups to CFlip for porting ClassiCube. All right, let's look at something else kind of cool. By the way, when I ran JSON earlier, I was using the sys kernel processes, and this has actually been moved. So it used to be in the proc file system, but this month the proc file system has undergone some serious spring cleaning or whatever. So this proc file system is now it's limited to processes, which is sort of how it was on some of the classic Unixes. I think Solaris was like that, and probably others as well, where in proc you only find the processes because that's sort of what it was meant for. But then we did sort of what Linux does and just jammed a bunch of other stuff in there, which wasn't really what proc was originally intended for. And all of that stuff has now moved to sys kernel instead. So it's part of the sysfs. And it's just a much nicer, cleaner structure to things. So I'm very happy with all of this work that Liav has been doing to clean that up. And Liav also, speaking of file systems, has also gotten rid of one of the file systems that we had. So we used to have a special file system for the dev directory where all of the device nodes live. And it was sort of it's just a dedicated file system in the kernel that implemented this directory, but this has now been converted to a regular tempfs. So if I look at the mount flags, we can see that dev is just a tempfs. It does use a special flag called noRegular, and this is a mount flag that was added specifically for Serenity so that we could maintain the behavior of the old devfs, which was that you can only put device files or directories in there. You can't put normal files. So if you were to try to create a normal file, then it says, no, can't do that. You can only have device files in dev. So I think that's pretty cool. So shout outs to Liav and anybody else who was involved with that. I think it's very cool to get rid of a file system from the kernel because it simplifies all the code we have to think about. Okay, and last thing I want to say about the kernel. There's been great progress this month on both on AArch64 and on USB support. I know that Timon has been doing a ton of work on AArch64, and I don't know exactly which part of the kernel he's working on now, but it sounded like he was getting close to having some kind of functioning memory management and scheduling. So very hype to see what happens in the future there. And in the USB department, I know that Black Cat and Jesse have both been working on improving our USB support, improving the way we do DMA allocation for USB transfers and stuff like that. But I don't really have a way to demo any of that. But it is lovely to see that those types of features are making progress. Anyway, let me show you something else super awesome that Gregory has been working on. So Gregory has been working on a video player and a VP9 video codec. So let me try to open this VP9 file here. This is a WebM video file, and it's being decoded and played back live, all in software, all in a SerenityOS VP9 video codec. So it's pretty cool. And as you can see, it's using a fair bit of CPU to do this. And it's a pretty low resolution video, but this is still amazing because it's basically an unoptimized video codec for VP9. And Gregory has been doing a super awesome job of bringing this together. And it's just really cool to see sort of the beginning of real video playback support coming into the system like this. So big shout outs to Gregory for working on that. And I wanted to say, so it's completely unoptimized, right? It's single threaded and no real optimizations or fancy techniques. And the design of the player and the library is relatively multi-threading friendly. It's just we're still running it single threaded while it's being worked on, so that we can bring it up and make it stable, make it able to read more video files, and then we can worry about performance. Anyway, so that's the video player. And something else, I guess let's look at, before I forget, some work has been happening in the PDF support this month as well. So Julian has added support for, among other things, Type 1 fonts. So it's like this Adobe Type 1 font format, which this is a test file that uses that. And the rendering is it's a little bit glitchy, but you can clearly see that it is working. And it's just awesome to see more people picking up and working on the PDF library. And thank you to Julian for doing that. All right, let's do some other app. So a little thing this month was that the shot utility, which creates a screenshot, normally you just run it and it grabs the screenshots and saves it as a PNG that you can open. It now has a -e extension for edit, which will open it up in Pixel Paint. So it's a little thing, shot-e, but it was added by Jeremy, and I think it's just a nice little nifty thing. And that brings us into Pixel Paint, which is what I want to talk about next. So something I requested was the ability to disable these extra scopes and histograms and stuff so that I don't have to see them when I don't need them. And Tim was gracious enough to implement that. So thank you very much, Tim. Tim has also done a whole bunch of other work on Pixel Paint. And one of the things that I love that he worked on is the Polygonal select tool. So it's now actually possible to make these cool polygonal selections. Like I'll make this, I don't even know what this is supposed to be, but that is what I selected. And let's fill that with magenta, one of the best debugging colors in the universe. And yeah, so as you can see, polygonal select, very, very cool. Thank you, Tim, for implementing that. I know Tim has more tools in the pipeline. He's just been doing a kick-ass job. And something else, since I have a selection here, is somebody added a invert selection thing. I think that was Snooze who added that. So I have now inverted the selection and I will fill it with blue instead. Klook. Pretty cool. So thank you very much, Snooze, for adding invert selection. And then let me go ahead and I wanted to make a different selection, like here, for example. And then there is a new filter that Benjamin added, hue saturation. Yeah, I think that was added this month by Benjamin, which we can use. I thought that would have only done it to the selection. I guess it doesn't work that way. Maybe it should. Regardless, the hue saturation filter, very cool. Cool thing to have. A must-have, you might even say. And the last thing I want to show you is crop layer to selection. This was added by Sergey. So as you can see, we now have a way to crop the layer to the current selection. It's different from crop image to selection, because as you can see, we keep the image the same size. It's only the layer that gets cropped. So previously we only had the ability to crop the entire image. So very, very nice. Also, it feels like when I sort of do this and undo, the image shifts a little bit in the viewport. Seems like a bug, but definitely not something that we have to investigate right now. All right, so those were a whole bunch of different things that were new this month. There's a lot more stuff, but these are the most demoable things I wanted to show you. So next we are going to visit Linus, who's going to talk about JavaScript and browser stuff.
All right, let's have a look at some of the LibJS changes from this month. First, something I can't demo that easily. So David has written a new double parser, which is much more accurate than the old one. And that's not really tied to LibJS itself, but it's independent, but he also then used it in a bunch of places in LibJS. For example, when we parse an input string like this, this will now yield better results. And this looks a bit funny because then serializing it back to a string for output in the REPL is still broken. Or not broken, but, a bit silly. And then second of all, of course, as every month, we had some temporal changes in the spec. Yeah, still working on that. But now, instead of me just going through these changes and making our engine compliant again, we had a big list this month. So Luke made a sort of checklist had a bunch of commits in there that we need to sync to. And then some people who had never contributed to LibJS before went and did some of those. So that's really cool to see. So we have a few new contributors this month. And just to mention everyone who worked on that, it was, I think, David, Idan, Luke, Mustafa, Yedaya, someone going by the name of Snooze, and myself. So it's really cool to see that many people working on this month. Let's demo some stuff. So, or actually, let's go into the bytecode mode here, because we have some changes in bytecode this month. So first of all, Andreas did a couple of things. For example, we now support non-base 10 big int literals. So if you say 0xff, for example, that's 255. But you can also specify that as a big int, and that also works. Of course, it doesn't make sense for a small number like this, but you can, of course, make the number as large as you want. And then we also support for something in something. So there's for off and for in. One iterates through the values of something, and then the other one through the own properties. And so that works like this. For foo in some array, for example, or could be an object as well. And then let's just console.log that. And as you can see, we get the index properties of the array in this case. And I don't know why it prints true. So that's nice to make a little bit more progress on bytecode. And speaking of bytecode, Leon, also known as Hendiadioin, did some changes there as well. So for example, if we make a new class, just something simple here, we now store the source code of that, which you in JavaScript can restore through the toString function. So if we just say foo toString, it gives us back that initial source string. And what he also did is spreading into arrays. So if you make an array like that, and then spread another array into it, 1, 2, 3, and then after that have a few more, that now becomes one array, 1 to 5. So it's definitely good to see the bytecode engine improving here, and it's, I think at this point, 10% less than the AST interpreter in terms of test262, so definitely catching up. Something else, we have now an implementation of the regular expression legacy properties. So on the regex constructor, which you could call like this, we now have a few static properties, like for example, last match, which currently doesn't do anything because we haven't run a regex yet. So let's do that. So if we say, for example, hello, and then let's add a capture group, friends, and then test the string, well, hello friends against that. Now that obviously matched, but what we can now do is tell us the last match, for example, and that is now stored on the regular expression constructor. So to clarify, this is legacy behavior that some websites rely on, and all the browsers have this implemented, even though it's not in the mainline spec. There's a proposal for it. And what else works? So we can, for example, ask for the input, which is the entire string, or we can just ask for the capture group, which is last parent, and that gives us friends from here. And these also work with some cryptic identifiers. So for example, $_, even though I don't think anyone can remember those. $&. Yeah, so this is just for the web out there, which still relies on legacy stuff. But it's good to have it implemented. And then lastly, we have String.Normalize now. So if you have a string that uses something like U0303. So this is a O character and then a combining character behind it. We don't render this properly because we don't have this in our font right now. But so this is a length. This is a string of length 2, but it will render as a single character if it was supported by our font. But now if we go ahead and reassign that and say s.normalize to its normalized form, then it suddenly prints as one character, because this one we do have in our font. And if we check the length again, it's now 1. So those that O and the combining character basically got merged into this Unicode character. And this was added by Tim, and I believe that built upon another change in libunicode, making this a more general implementation that can be used across the system. All right, let's have a look at the browser changes now. So let's open up a browser here. First of all, we have some UI changes, so things that are not in the underlying engine, but sort of in this browser application itself. If we go to Google, for example, and hope they give us a cookie, and then we open the storage inspector. Yeah, okay, so you can see we have a couple of cookies here. So new this month is you can delete cookie and you can delete all cookies, which was implemented by Sam. And so let's start with deleting a single cookie. Now that didn't update anything here, so you have to close this window, open it again, and it's gone. And of course you can also delete all, and then reopen that window, and they are all gone. So this is definitely good for testing, or if you just want to get rid of some cookies. Let's see, what else? We have a very cool change in the JS console. So if I just load this test page here, where did it go? Exceptions. So this is a simple HTML page. And if I now open a JS console, you can see it has a whole bunch of errors in it. One is a DOM exception. One is a JS syntax error, so something didn't pass. We have an uncaught type error with a stack trace here, just one line. Same for a reference error. And then we have even an error in a promise that wasn't handled. And so all of these now show up in this console. Previously, they would either not show up anywhere, or you had to grab them from the QEMU debug console window, which is now off screen. But this is really nice because it makes it a lot easier to just debug websites, or, test out some stuff and then see if it doesn't work. So thanks for adding this to Pavel. And then another big change this month is an implementation of WebDriver, which is a specification to sort of automate a browser. So you can write a script that then does stuff in the browser for you. So let me show that to you. And this was added by Sam, but he revived an old PR from Florent. So it was sort of work from two people. And then Tobias and Sam and myself added a bunch of endpoints, and Mustafa as well. So we now got to roughly 50% of endpoints. And you will see that in a second. So WebDriver in itself is just a web server, basically, now listening on this address and port. But it can also create a connection to a browser window. So if we post using the Pro, which is for protocol server, post to this address at /session, it will create a window for us. You can see it handled the request here. And so this window is now controlled by the WebDriver, as we can see from the navigator.webdriver property, which is now true, which means this instance is controlled. And then and as you can see, we got back a session ID here, which is currently 0. And so if we post to that session ID and say /URL and then provide one, for example, the SerenityOS homepage, the browser will load this for us. And so obviously this is very powerful. and can, for example, be used to run the web platform tests eventually. We're not quite there yet. And it will support all sorts of stuff like selecting elements, getting their text, their properties, their CSS attributes, and so on. So good work by the whole team of Sam, Tobias, Florent, Mustafa. Really cool to see this happening. And let's have a look at the changes in the engine as well. So first of all, I want to mention a big refactor by Andrew, who changed a bunch of stuff about how we store prototype objects. Previously, I had to go to the global object for that. It wasn't great. And very similar to what I did a while ago in LibJS, that is now on the intrinsics object, which we can get from around. If you didn't understand that, doesn't matter. It's just a really nice improvement in terms of code quality. And he also did a big change on how we expose interfaces to the window object. So previously we had to hand define that in a big list, and now that is passed from IDL, which is the language that we use for code generation. So thanks, Andrew, for both of these changes. That was nice to see. Let's look at some features. So first of all, we have 2 new backdrop filter types. So we had these since last month, I believe. And new this month are Saturate and Hue Rotate, both added by MagDew, same as these old filters as well. So you can apply those to some background now, and it will, as you can see here, for example, tweak the colors. We also have more work on CSS Grid this month, which was again done by Martin. So for example, so all of these I've shown in previous videos, but now here it gets a little bit more interesting because, for example, we can now have minimum and maximum width. So these, for example, all are 200 pixels wide at the minimum. So if I make this browser window small, they will sort of stop shrinking. So now you can see this 3 is almost off screen now. But if I make it larger, they will expand to sharing 100% of the viewport width. So you can make quite advanced layouts with those. And the same works for a bunch of different values here. For example, here we have a 1 and 2. And so if I expand this a bunch, it will sort of stop expanding because the limit is set. And now if I shrink it again, you can see they shrink with the viewport, so they share up to 100% of this width. So it's nice to see that Grid is improving now that Flexbox is quite supported as well. Both still need more work, but this is a really good step into the right direction. And then let's see, we have also support for JavaScript modules in the browser now, which unfortunately I can't show you on an actual web page because that didn't load earlier, but I have a local demo. So that was added by network exception. And I think they basically just wanted to make their own website work, which uses JS modules. And so that's how that happened. If I go here in the home directory and start a web server, first of all, let me show you the file. So I have an index file, which is simply a script type module, and then imports foo from module.js, and then it alerts with foo. And I can also open the module, which is a simple JavaScript module, which exports a single string. Now if we open a web server here, and then load this page in a browser, that did not work. Oh, I think I have to specify this directory. Yeah, and as you can see, it loaded the page, which referenced the module. It loaded the module, it imported a constant, and we alerted that. So this is really, really cool to see. We had module support in plain JavaScript for a while now, but it needed to be hooked up to the whole web engine, which is a bit special in that regard, just so you can't just, for example, load modules from the file system. And obviously a network fetch is a bit more involved. So thank you, network exception, for adding that. It's really nice to see. And then one very small but kind of special change is our UserAgent string, which we can see from navigator.useragent. If I type it correctly. And as you can see, it now reports as SerenityOS x86-64 libweb plus LibJS Ladybird. And this previously used to say browser. And this is because we no longer consider Ladybird to just be the cute GUI around libweb that Andreas made a while back, but it's sort of now this whole web engine and browser project, including everything from libweb, LibJS, this browser, the browser that runs on Linux. So if you have a website, I know some people do specifically look out for the browser UA to make some SerenityOS specific changes. That is now different, and it's nice to see. Andreas, of course, worked on a whole bunch of different things this month. Everything from a ton of layout fixes and improvements to CSS to web APIs to garbage collection. He was all over the place. And we made some really good progress. So if you follow him on Twitter, you could already see that we got Google Maps basically loading in the browser. We have Instagram making progress. So he's been working on a bunch of big websites and they now render more or less okay. One I want to mention as well is YouTube, which for a while just didn't do much. And then Luke did some very targeted fixes and now YouTube loads basically everything but videos, which is really cool. Unfortunately, I can't show it here. I tried it earlier and it's banned in the CPU, so I don't know what's up with that. But yeah, really good month in terms of progress. Really excited to see what's next. And that's it for today.
And that's all the stuff that we had to show you today. So thank you all so much for checking in and staying up to date with the project. Big thanks to Linus for co-hosting. Make sure you subscribe to Linus here on YouTube as well for more SerenityOS hacking content. And if you want to come chat, do join the SerenityOS Discord server. There's a link in the video description. And you can also come to the weekly live stream that I host here on YouTube. It's every Friday at 4 p.m. Swedish time, normally. And it's called SerenityOS Office Hours. Everybody's welcome to ask whatever they want to know about SerenityOS. Finally, if you would like to sponsor development of SerenityOS, you can find donation options for some of our developers in the video description below. I'm personally working on this full-time since May of last year, thanks to the generous support of so many awesome people. And I actually have a blog post out this month, which talks in detail about how I'm able to support myself thanks to community donations. So there's a link to that in the video description as well if you are curious about the details of that. Anyway, big thanks to everybody who is making it possible for me to do this. All right, that's it for today. So thank you all and see you next time. Bye.